I welcome you all to the Global GoaCon 2025 and extend my heartiest regards to all my seniors, faculties, juniors, friends, colleagues and students. Today I will be discussing upon the topic biopharmaceuticals and gene therapy. First of all, let's get to know the definition and the basics. Biopharmaceuticals include proteins and antibodies and oligonucleotides. They are used as drugs. They can be of two types, first generation and second generation. The first generation biopharmaceuticals are mainly the copies of endogenous proteins and antibodies, and the method of their production is recombinant DNA technology. The second generation biopharmaceuticals, on the other hand, they are engineered to enhance and improve upon the performance of the protein, antibody or antisense agent. Some well-known applications of the biopharmaceuticals are therapeutic monoclonal antibodies, recombinant hormones, a wonderful control of the gene expression, that is oligonucleotides. Now I would like to give a brief overview of the gene therapy. Gene therapy is nothing but it is the addition of genetic material to the cells to prevent, diminish or cure a disease. And now you can very well understand the applications of gene therapy. First is the radical cure of monogenic diseases like cystic fibrosis, hemoglobinopathies, and reduction in the disease with or without a genetic component, and that includes examples like many malignant neurodegenerative diseases and also infectious diseases. From very olden times, the proteins were used as therapeutic agents. If you remember, the extraction of insulin from animal pancreatic tissue, extraction of the human growth hormone from the cadaver pituitary gland, these were the initial proteins that were used therapeutically, but there was always a problem arising from the administration of animal proteins to the humans. It was visible when there was a proper case of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease due to the administration of human growth hormone derived from the cadaver pituitary glands. To deal with all such kind of problems, there has been a great improvement, enhancement in the technology with the advent of genetic engineering techniques. Now let's talk about protein and polypeptides. As I told you, the first generation and the second generation biopharmaceuticals are there. The first generation, they are produced by the recombinant DNA technology. One of the greatest examples and the first and the initial examples is recombinant human insulin that was produced in 1982. While the second generation biopharmaceuticals, they are engineered. There is a proper alteration of the gene so that the structure of the recombinant protein is actually transformed, and that is done deliberately to improve the protein's activity profile. Recently, among all of the production methods, the use of plants for the generation of the recombinant proteins has attracted a lot of interest. The human genes can be readily transfected into the plant genes, and that readily offers a lot of advantages. Examples are the use of lettuce and bananas to produce orally active proteins, such as vaccines, and they can be consumed even without purification. Other examples are milk protein. Now a word about the engineered proteins. Alteration is done in the nucleotide sequence, and then a single amino acid or a whole region of the polypeptide chain can be changed. This has a great advantages. Some of them I can list. It helps in the modification of pharmacokinetic properties. There is a propensity of the novel fusion and creation of novel proteins. Then we can reduce immunogenicity by humanizing a protein. Now let's talk about monoclonal antibodies. In 1975, Milstein and Kohler, they discovered a novel method and produced from immunized mice a hybridoma, a fusion of lymphocytic clone with an immortalized tumor cell, and that created and paved the way of method of producing monoclonal antibodies, which are abbreviated as MABs, a single piece of monovalent antibody. Now we can classify the MABs into first and second generation. The first generation, they are nothing but simple murine monoclonals, and they had several drawbacks. They could produce a lot of immune responses. They had a short half-life. They were not able to activate the human complement. And now they are available chimerized or humanized MABs. Now a little description of the monoclonal antibody structure. The antibody molecule consists of a constant domain and an antibody binding domain, FAB. The Fab has hypervariable region that recognize and bind to the antigen. The genes for the chimeric MABs, they contain the cDNA of the murine Fab domain coupled with the human FC domain sequences. As you can see in the diagram, at the tip of the Fab regions, they are hypervariable regions that bind the antigen. For humanized antibodies, only the murine hypervariable regions are retained, while the remainder of the molecule is human in origin. This has many advantages. The half-life is extended, the protein turnover is very rapid, the functionality of the antibody is improved. One of the wonderful examples is the anti-cancer monoclonal Herceptin. Trastuzumab is a very good example where the monoclonal antibody is essentially human in nature with the minimal murine antibody binding sites. A word about the oligonucleotides. In this, there is an alternative way of modifying the genetic material. Amongst the most useful approaches is the antisense oligonucleotides. They are short oligonucleotides and they are complementary to a part of gene or gene product, and they can be accordingly made to modify, suppress or activate the process. They are administered parenterally. The mechanism of action is the interference with the transcription of mRNA, and also in part they stimulate the breakdown by ribonuclease. Mipomersen was the first ever licensed antisense therapeutic. It suppresses the expression of apolipoprotein B and is used to treat a very rare form of hypercholesterolemia. One another recently approved drug, eteplirsen. It targets a particular region of dystrophin which is mutated in Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and the final product is partially functional version of the protein. Another related approach which provides more efficient gene silencing than antisense oligonucleotides is the use of short interfering RNA, siRNA, and also short lengths of double-stranded RNA. They recruit an enzyme complex, RISC, RNA-induced silencing complex. It selectively degrades the corresponding mRNA and blocks the expression. Now let's consider some pharmacological aspects. There are some differences in the pharmacological properties of proteins and oligonucleotides and those of the conventional small molecule drugs. The size of the conventional small molecule drugs is very less than 500 kilodalton, while that of the biopharmaceuticals is more than 5000 kilodalton. The conventional drug is very easy to make and it's very easy to synthesize identical batches, while on the other hand the biopharmaceuticals, they are unique. As far as the dose and effect relationship is concerned, there is a quite predictable relationship in the case of conventional small molecule drug, while in the case of biopharmaceuticals it's a complex mechanism of action. Something like high affinity binding, slow on and off rates, unusual shaped dose response curves. Let's talk about the pharmacokinetics differences. The conventional small molecule, they are orally administered generally, while on the other hand, the biopharmaceuticals, they are parenterally administered. The absorption is variable in case of the conventional drug. There is a high bioavailability of the biopharmaceuticals on the other hand. The excretion of the conventional drug is in the urine and feces. The biopharmaceuticals on the other hand, they have an atypical distribution and removal mechanisms. As far as the areas and the toxicology aspect is concerned, It's variable in case of conventional drug molecules, and there are possible drug interactions. In case of biopharmaceuticals, the possible adverse drug reactions can be immunogenicity. Other drug interactions, they are quite less and generally not very important or noticeable. Now a little discussion about the gene therapy. In 1944, Avery and his colleagues, they proved and showed that virulence factor can be transferred among two strains of pneumococcus, and now it is identified as DNA. Then there was a molecular biology revolution in the further 1980s, and now there are many details in the different kind of aspects like pharmacokinetics, the delivery of the gene, and in the modern era, further enhancement of the technology has prevailed, and we can see in different processes and aspects like in pharmacokinetics, the delivery of gene to the interior of the appropriate target cells. In the pharmacodynamics, the controlled expression of the gene. Then there is also enhancement of this revolution in the safety, clinical efficacy, and long-term practicability. Now let's talk about gene delivery. Gene therapy actually involves three things: gene delivery, and gene delivery. Now the hurdles or the barriers can be overcome. The techniques are borrowed from the viruses. Actually, we consider viruses as the masters of the molecular hijacking, which is required to introduce the functional genes into the mammalian cells. And that is the approach that is actually adapted into the gene therapy research. Now, there are several important considerations in choosing a gene delivery system. Some of these are the capacity of the system, how much DNA it can carry, the transfection efficiency, that is the ability to enter and become utilized by the cells, the lifetime of the transfected material. It is also determined and dependent upon the lifetime of the targeted cell. And last but not the least, the safety issue. And that is very, very important in the case of viral delivery system. The two main gene therapy strategies involve in vivo technique and the vector containing the therapeutic gene. That is another technique. Ideal vector should be safe, highly efficient, and very selective. Now a word about the viral vectors. Now many contemporary gene delivery strategies, they capitalize the capacity of viruses to fuse with the host genome. But there are substantial practical problems with this viral vector approach. Now viruses have actually evolved a lot of means to invade the human cells, and humans have evolved a lot of immune responses as their protective measures. But the safety issue is still very, very controversial. Most of the viruses that are used as vectors, they are pathogenic, but they are usually modified in such a way that their replication is defective and the toxicity can be avoided. Examples are retrovirus, adenovirus, other viral vectors like herpes virus. These are some examples. A word about the non-viral vectors. So to reduce the safety issues and the toxicity problems with the viral vectors, a variety of other substances have been adopted to deliver the genes, and they are known as nanocarriers. The examples are liposomes, microspheres, plasmid DNA. Now a word regarding the safety issues. Now experiments involving the transfer of the genetic material. Actually, it produces a lot of unease in the society. Now this can be a product of ignorance and prejudice, but there is a problem that hinders the new agents. And there is a lot of concern related to the viral vectors. Though they are modified, they are made defective, but there is a concern. They may acquire virulence during the use. For example, retroviruses which are inserted into the DNA, they can damage the genome and they can also interfere with the protective mechanisms. Another problem is the immunogenic viral proteins. They can actually flare up an inflammatory response. Now this could be really harmful in some of the situations. So these are the safety concerns and the societal issues that are always a hindrance and problem, and actually a point to ponder over by many people before such therapies are adopted with ease. But there are therapeutic applications. Recently, the gene therapy trials, they have been reviewed and approved by the regulatory agencies. The first was Gendicine. It was licensed in China in 2003. The European Medicine Agency, they licensed Glybera in 2012. In 2016, Strimvelis was licensed in Europe. Recently, a system of gene editing, originally discovered in bacteria, is a promising gene therapy. There's a complex name of this one, clustered regulatory interspersed short palindromic repeat, and that is abbreviated as CRISPR, capital CRISPR. It can target nucleases and edit the genes of interest. But till date, none of these CRISPR therapies have been approved. The human trials, they are underway, and it's very close of getting the gene therapy to the clinic. So safety concerns, they are specific to a particular gene therapy and also related to the nature of vectors. So in the conclusion, what do we conclude with this whole information and lecture? Well, I would say that protein and oligonucleotide biopharmaceuticals, they actually share some characteristics, but that cannot be said same for the gene therapy. And actually, to really discuss the approval, the affirmation of this particular gene therapy is not a very confirmatory thing today. It is still under trials, research, and a lot needs to be done in this particular direction. Well, gene does not carry inherent pharmacodynamic or pharmacokinetic properties. All the adverse drug reactions, all the toxicity are to be blamed upon the viral vectors and not the gene itself. So there is actually a doubt that this will be a major therapeutic approach or modality, but much needs to be researched upon and pondered upon and actually experimented to bring out the best possible therapies involving the gene therapies and the biopharmaceuticals in the future treatment modalities. With this concluding remark, I would like to end today's discussion about biopharmaceuticals and gene therapy. Well, I can just only say in the end, genes are like story, DNA is the language that the story is written in. Thank you.